Hey, good morning or afternoon, everyone. This is Mark here, and today we're going to go through our Quality Inspector application for Business Central, and specifically talking around some things around how you can move from paper-based solution to a, online electronic quality control solution. All right, with that, let's get started. So Quality Inspector, it is sort of an inspection tool. It's not a full QMS, but it's getting pretty close. And what it allows you to do is create, quality inspection documents, right, that you can enter electronically. And that inspection can be on anything, right? So what we do is we make it very configurable, because you'll have your own quality process. You'll have a way of doing things now. We're not going to throw something in there that's very rigid and say, this is how you have to do quality. We made it configurable so you can basically continue to use your existing best practice, quality inspection and quality control processes, and you just configure the software to work with those processes. And within that, we can do, grading. So if you have, grade A, B, C product based on test results, we can do that automatically for you. We have, sort of AQL, acceptable quality limits, and sampling functionality in it. So if you need to take samples of received or produced product, and measure those samples and deal with the grading or the pass-fail based on that, we can do that as well. We integrate with Power Automate and the built-in Business Central workflows to extend the solution to do whatever you like. And one of the examples online, we have a ton of videos online of this thing, is sending out a Teams message when a test fails or something like that, or when a new test is created and assigned, we can send somebody a Teams message or an email or whatever you want to do. So there's a whole bunch of stuff there. And speaking of Teams, we have that Teams integration. So, you're pretty used to that in Business Central already. You can hit the share button and share to Teams. And instead of just sending a link, we also send some additional information with that. So people without Business Central licenses can get, a lot more information on those tests without having to log into Business Central right from Teams. We can run this on tablets and phones, so that's a pretty common use case, right? We've got quality inspectors out there walking around with a phone or a tablet needing to record information or even just look up information. We do have those capabilities as well. So you can be mobile when you're doing this, or this could be sitting in a lab somewhere and doing it. And we've got some sort of core functionality for production and purchasing, some default behavior in there that you can configure. But you can extend that, so it's not just for production and purchasing. You can extend that to anything in Business Central. So that includes sales, like you have a pre-shipment checklist, and if that checklist fails, like I didn't include the warranty card or the serial number tag is missing or something like that, you can prevent that sales order from shipping. Or I want to do a test on a fixed asset or a person or whatever, or custom table, a rental return or whatever you want to do. You can create those quality inspections on anything within the system, and without any coding, add custom buttons to execute tests and look up tests and all those sorts of things right from within Business Central. All right, now let's talk about part of what was in the title of this presentation, and that's how do you move to digital quality control or electronic quality records. And so what happens with quality and asset maintenance and a bunch of things like that, everybody wants to do it, right? Oh, we need to be digital, we need to be electronic, we don't want to do this paper stuff anymore. Great goal, very hard to do sometimes, right? It's a lot of work to get people to move from paper to electronic. There's a bunch of setup work, there's a bunch of process change. The guys on the shop floor are used to writing stuff on paper, now you're telling them to type things in, like holy moly, that's never going to work. So what we have within Quality Inspector and Asset Maintenance and a few other things is the ability to either fully or partially retain your paper-based processes while still getting the value of that electronic data record. And what that allows you to do is basically start with that electronic data record and then slowly move off paper as people become comfortable with it. And the way we do that is with the AI. So we use the Azure Document Intelligence to grab your existing paper-based quality documents, suck those in, automatically generate the electronic data entry forms within Business Central, and then also take the filled in paper copies where people have written in what they've done, import those in, and record those values directly in Business Central. So again, now you can for the most part, continue to use your paper-based processes with a couple extra steps to get those into Business Central, but now you've got that electronic record keeping. Okay? And then as you get more familiar with it, you just get rid of the paper and everything just flows very well. All right, so enough of that talking. Let's get in and see what this thing looks like. So I'm going to jump into Business Central here. And this is the very simple role center for the quality inspector. Now, of course, you can extend this to show everything you like, but this makes it very easy to get in here. Very simple, straightforward, easy to use. And this is also available again in an optimized form on the tablet and the phone. And to give you an idea of what this thing can do, I'm just going to jump into the setup here and show you a little bit about how we set the thing up, just to give you a feel for what it's capable of. So first, there's some basic settings. There's a ton of configuration you can do on it, right? So a bunch of defaults and things like that. And the only thing I'll mention here is the ability to have sort of the default quality inspection numbers, but you can have a different number series per test type. So you can have a different number series for receiving tests versus production test versus something else, those sorts of things. The other thing over here is the ability to attach documents and pictures and everything else from either a phone or a tablet or right from the desktop. And I've got it set to use Doc Extender here, which will either push it to SharePoint or push it in as attachment, depending on how you've got Doc Extender set up. So a whole bunch of stuff there, not all that important to cover here. I will briefly mention on the receiving and production side. So I did mention that we've got some sort of basic stuff or some core stuff set up for receiving and production that you can extend. Like you can do all of this type of stuff again with sales or whatever other jobs or whatever you want to do. But we've got sort of these defaults here preset for receiving and production. And so what this allows me to do is say, hey, you know what? I want to create a test, as soon as the purchase order is posted. So I receive something, I post that receipt. Now we create a quality inspection test to, inspect the product that just came in the door. Or we can say, you know what? We're going to do it when the warehouse receipt is created, if you're using that, those types of things. So you can do all of that kind of stuff. And then what we can do is we can say, you know what? In this case, I can't post that receipt until I've got an actual test that's passed for that specific product that's on that purchase order. So you can do things like that. Again, prevent actual posting of that receipt before there's a test. Now, you probably normally don't want to do that. Most people want to receive the product, and then do the test and then decide how they're going to dispose of it, like you send it back to the vendor or change the grade or whatever they want to do with it. But it does have those options. And same thing here with production. So we can automatically create the test when output is posted. So as soon as you post output, it creates a test for you, optionally pops it up based on the setting that's up above, pop up that test and away you go. Or we can create that those tests when the production order is released. So based on the rules you set up, which I'll show you in a minute, you can go in and you can say, hey, when this production order is released, I'm going to create these 5 tests for it automatically based on the rules I've set up. Maybe I've got one for, the initial, assembly, another one for welding, another one for mixing, or whatever you want to do, and you can do it that way. Okay, or you can create any of these tests manually. A couple other things here that I'll mention. We do have the ability to do disposition automatically, which means if I want to put something in QC hold, I can move that inventory automatically into like a QC hold location or a QC hold bin, those sorts of things. And down here on this personal device interface, I'll mention this because when you're running it on a phone or a tablet, back to that ability to configure this thing to your heart's content, this is actually what shows up in a list on the phone or the tablet. So you can define what shows up here. And the other thing that is used for is when we share to Teams, this is the information that's sent into that Teams card when we do that share to Teams. All right, anyway, most of this other stuff is, basic. It's you run the setup wizard when you install it. It'll set all the defaults pretty well, and there's not much else you have to do. A couple of other quick things on here. We'll go in and I'll talk very briefly about how we set up quality inspectors. So you have, of course, the standard Business Central permissions configurations, right? You can prevent people from creating tests based on access to the table and things like that. But then on a per tester basis, right, a per quality inspector basis, you can define who you treat as a quality inspector. And then you have very granular permissions about what they're allowed to do within the system. Like, are they allowed to, finish a test or reopen a test or create a retest on something, right? So you can define who's allowed to do what within the quality inspection module based on, their login. So not only do we have the base Business Central configuration, we also have these additional functional permissions that you're able to set per user. All right. Now, the other thing I'll mention here is the grades. So we do have the ability to automatically grade product if that's important. So I have, just the basics. I have in progress, fail, and pass is what I'm normally using. So, that indicates if we're passing or failing a test. But I could also have, tests that automatically grade the product. And so what that will do is if something falls out of my, primary sort of tolerances, maybe I put that as a grade B product or a grade C product or whatever you like. And then based on the grade of that product, I can define what we're allowed to do with that specific product. And this is based on the lot numbers, right? So for grade C, I'm not allowed to sell a grade C product and I'm not allowed to buy it, but I could use it in my own product. I could consume grade C product and all those sorts of things. So there's a whole bunch of additional granular functionality you can set at the lot number level based on the grade that you defined. And normally, for most people, it's going to be kind of pass, fail, or in progress. So for example, if I have an in progress test on a lot, in this case, I wouldn't be able to sell it. I'm not allowed to sell a lot number that's being tested, as an example. So you can set all of those things up. This last one here, that's an acceptable quality limit failure code that you can set up. And what that does is we can use that to immediately terminate a test. So if something, hits this AQL fail grade based on our configuration, we can go in and fail that entire test. So if one sample fails in my acceptable quality limit configuration, right, maybe I've got 20 samples I need to do, and one of them is a critical failure or something like that, that'll immediately fail the test, and I don't have to do anything else on that test because we've hit a critical failure. So we have that ability to terminate tests early as well if there's an issue, like a really bad issue with the sample or something along those lines. Okay, so that's the grading. And then speaking of samples, we do have the full AQL, standard quality inspection stuff. These are sort of the standards, the AQL standards, the general, the inspection level, the lot size you're dealing with, and then it generates a sampling plan. And then based on that sampling plan, you can come in and it defines the acceptable quality limit and those sorts of things. And there's an example of that AQL fail. If this particular thing fails, we're just going to fail the test 100%. At any rate, you can create your own sample sizes and everything else, but if you're using the AQL approach, what this allows us to do is you set your inspection level and then your sampling plan, and it'll tell you what your sample size needs to be, what's allowed to pass or fail based on that sample size. So very, standard automatic type thing. All right, so that's the basic setup and some of the functionality we have. Let's have a look at how we actually put all of that stuff together. So I'm going to come in here, and the core of this thing is what we call a test template. And a test template is the entry form that you create to actually capture your test results. So I'm going to go into test templates here, and you see I've got a bunch of these things set up already. And I'm going to create one in a bit from scratch, but for now, I'm just going to open up one of these guys. So again, you can have all sorts of different types of tests. Like this bicycle checklist would be a checklist that I use before I ship something, as an example. Is the bike packaged properly? Does it have its wheels on it? Does it have the serial number on it? All those sorts of things before I can ship it. And then I've got things like this pathogen, which is a test for production or possibly for receiving as well, that checks for specific criteria within a specific lot number. So let's open this guy up first. All right, so what we've got here is, something very basic. What I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, I'm doing this pathogen test. Down here, I've got the fields, the entry data I want to capture. So in this case, I'm capturing the plate count, the coliform count, and whether E. coli is present or not. And this tells me what I'm allowed to enter. So I'm allowed to enter a big number here for allowable values. Over here is what indicates a pass or a fail. So this is just the standard Business Central sort of filter syntax, right? 0 to 1 million, 0 to 0.01. And this, by the way, is a lookup list. So it'll allow me to choose from these two different options. And if it's absent, then it's going to be a pass. And what I should do is put the text here, because this is what the user is going to see. It's going to say it's got to be between these values to be a pass, and it's got to be this value to be a pass, that sort of thing. Now these fields, you get to create those fields yourself, right? Or add fields. Like if I needed to capture some additional information on this, I can just go add fields to this template, and I can either create a new field from scratch, or I can use an existing field. So maybe I want to see, I don't know, doesn't really matter here. I don't think we want to do height. Maybe I want to do weight or something like that. I want to measure the weight of this particular thing. So I could actually come in here and say, I just want to reuse this weight field that matches my criteria, and I'm going to hit finish, and it's going to add that field on there. So you can build up whatever you like. And if you create a new field, it can be, sort of text, it can be a lookup list, it can be numeric, it could be a lookup to a custom table if you like, a whole bunch of different things you can set. And all we're saying is, let's do this to match my description. If it's between 20 and 60, it's going to be a pass, and that's basically it. So that's how we set that up. Now, one other thing down here, the field grades, again, I've only got it set up for sort of, in progress, pass, fail type situation. But you could have here again where I say a, grade A is going to be, well, let's go back up to this. Maybe a grade A is anything under 10, and a grade B is anything between 10 and 900,000, and a grade C is everything over 900,000. So you can set up those limits here, and it'll automatically grade the product, grade that lot number that you're using based on the results of the test. Okay. So at any rate, this is how we set up the entry form. Now up here, we've also got the ability, well, a couple other things. Again, here I can set a different number series. If I'm only using this pathogen test for receiving, maybe I want to set up a number series for quality inspection receiving tests, or maybe a number series for this explicit type of text or something like that, just to help, filter and isolate, by the test number what you're dealing with. And this caption refers to what we see on the test. So the top of the page here, where it'll, you can set whatever format you want to show what's on that. Those are optional. Usually they're not shown. Now here is where we can come in and set the default inspection level. So that's at AQL that says this is what we want to come in and set as our defaults on any new tests. Now this won't actually do anything. If I create a new test at this point, it's actually not going to do anything. And the reason is the way this is set up is these are individual entries. So if I create a new test for this, and I can create that new test from here, but more typically, you're going to have it automatically created. Like, for example, when I release that production order, it'll automatically create whatever tests I need. I can also go right to the production order or the purchase order or whatever page I like, hit a button, and it'll create a test for me to capture the data. And when that test is created, it's going to have a place where I can enter one value at a time. But for this particular one, I need to take a sample. I need to take a whole bunch of different samples and measure these few things at the sample level, not at sort of the individual lot number level. So there's a few ways you can do that. Some people create a new test for every sample they take, because maybe they're taking samples once a day for a week. Well, maybe a new test makes sense. The other way we can do it is we can create a retest. So you have one test, so one, test number, one document number, and you just create retests on that to do your samples. But because we have that sample stuff built in, what it allows us to do is come in here, and anything that we want to take multiple samples on for this test, we set the sample summary here. And what this will do is this will show us sort of an aggregate of all the samples that we've measured so far. So if I come in here and I specify average, I might take 10 samples. It's going to show me the average of those 10 samples at the top level. And you'll see how this works in a sec. So I'm just going to do a few of these. I'll just do them all average, but you can see there's a bunch of stuff. You can do the standard deviation, the variance, all that kind of stuff. I'm just going to say average. And by doing this, what this does is says, I now need to capture samples for those three criteria. This E. coli present, if it's present in anywhere, it doesn't matter, it's going to be a fail, so I'm not going to do it at the sample level. So now we've got this thing set up. This is saying this is the information we need to capture. Some of these we're going to do based on the samples, and this one is just going to be based on the lot number in total. So how do we actually create the test? Well, what does that test look like? Well, let me tell you. So the first thing we can do is we can create that test right from here, which we'll do, or go to the production order, the purchase order, whatever. But in order to do that, we first set up these test generation rules. And this is what tells us what that test is associated with. So in this case, I've already got one set up that says, hey, we've got this rule that says on receiving, right, because it's going to a purchase line, where any purchase line that matches this vendor, we're going to generate this test. So that's the example of when I create a warehouse receipt potentially, anything that I'm buying from this vendor, we'd get this pathogen test on that against that warehouse receipt or against that purchase order. Okay? But I want to do this for production as well. So I'm going to come in here and create another rule that says this is going to be for production. And what I do, it defaults into the production order routing line. But again, you can come in here and set up any table you like. So this could be custom tables. It can be built-in Business Central tables like fixed assets, whatever you like, employees. And this tells us, what kind of tests we can create for those different records. So in this case, I am going to choose the production order routing line, which means at the operation level, I'm going to be able to automatically create tests for this. And then I could get fancy and say, well, it's not actually all that fancy, but let's go in here and I'll just do the work center number. When we come in here and we're working at the mixer, what'll happen is when I release a production order now that has a mixer work center on an operation, we're automatically going to create this pathogen test for that specific operation that uses that work center. So that's all automatic, okay? And that's what you do if you wanted that automatic generation. Or if I go to the production order and I hit create test, it'll go, oh, you mean this test. We want to create a pathogen test because you're at the mixer work center. And I could have multiple tests associated with that mixer, and it'll create those multiple tests for us. All right, now that I've got that set up, I can create a test either for purchasing or production at this point. So again, I'm not going to go to the production order. I'm just going to create the test right from here. But again, usually it's going to be automatically created, or you're going to create it right from the purchase order or the production order or whatever. But if I do it from here, first thing I do is I say, okay, I'm going to create, the production order routing line. I'm going to use that, and then I'm going to come in here and choose the production order and specific operation that I want to do that test for. So let's just look for one that has got a mixer on it, and I'm going to choose that. And by the way, when I create it from here, I get to choose whatever record I like. That filter I set earlier for the mixer, that's for the automatic test generation. So it'll automatically do it based on the mixer. And here it's also saying, hey, this item number is lot tracked. What lot number do you want to do this test for? So it's going to look up all the lot numbers that are defined for that production order or purchase order or item ledger entry or whatever you're doing the test against. And I'm going to bring that up, and we're going to do the test on lot number 4. So when I hit OK, what it's going to do is it's going to create that test for us, and here we go. So there's the test, and I can come in here and enter anything I like. Now I click that for a reason, because this one is a sample test. I have to have I'm going to do samples. But if we look up at the top here, what it's done is it hasn't chosen a sample size for us, okay? And what I'm going to do, because 100 doesn't fit within my general level 3, which is my default. So I'm just going to define a sample size for us. So I'm going to say, out of this 100 kilograms that we're doing, I'm going to do 10 samples and I can accept, single failure basically. So I can override all of that stuff if I like, but that will normally come in from our inspection level and our sampling plan code and all that kind of stuff. Okay. Now, one other quick thing down here, it will come in and it shows us exactly, all the control information for the production order that we're working with. Sorry, my Business Central just decided to do something. The production order and everything we're working with. So here's all the details. This test, we know exactly what it's linked to, whether it's a purchase order, production order, whatever. We've got that control information to tie this test directly to that specific document, activity, whatever you like, and also to that, specific lot number as well that we're doing the test for, or serial number and everything else. Okay. All right. So now that I've got a sample size set, I can actually start entering data. So on this E. coli present, I can just come in here and enter the data directly because we don't have a sample that we need to do. So I come in here and enter that. For the rest, where we have to do sampling, I can use a sample worksheet. And what that will do is it'll come in and allow me to enter the values here, right? And whatever, I can't remember the tolerances. So if I'm doing one sample, I can enter all 3 values for that sample across. And here's the 10 samples that I've defined. And I can go in and list all of those samples here. And if I enter something that's out of spec, it's going to indicate in red that it's a failure. The other way we can do that is on a sort of field by field basis. I can come in and enter that field in the sample sheet just for that specific test. So this gives me a lot more information about that particular test that I need to perform. So the different samples and everything else I need to do, and the statistics for that specific attribute that we're testing. So I can come in here and enter all sorts of stuff. So let's do something more reasonable here, those sorts of things. So I can come in and enter all those samples, and it keeps track of the statistics. Now what that does down here, this is still a failure because it's outside my limits. It'll come in here, and then based on that that average that we've got set here, it'll indicate if that's a pass or fail. So even though we had one sample that failed, it fell within our sampling limits, and this is an overall pass. But we could say, hey, you know what? If any single one of those samples fails, we could set it up so that it automatically forces the grade to a fail because of that AQL grade that we've set up. So there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do there with sampling. And probably most of you don't care about sampling, but it is highly useful and important in a lot of industries where you can come in and record various samples for whatever you like. And this can be in production. Like you can set this up. I didn't really go through the settings. But you can set this up so that every 100 items I produce, I got to record another test. So it can either create another test, or I could go in here and do a sample at every 100 units that I've produced. Or if I'm receiving, 1,000 O-rings and I want to sample 10 of them or 20 of them or whatever it is, or if I'm receiving flour and I need to do the sort of pathogen test, all of that is very handy. Okay. Now let's do a simpler one, the 2 simpler ones. So this one, it's a little more involved because we've got the sampling and all that kind of stuff. Let's just do this bicycle checklist thing real quick. This one's pretty simple. I've got a few checks here that I need to do to get this thing out the door. I've got no sampling or anything like that. I've got some test generation rules that say when I sell it or when I make it, I got to run this, run this test on it, and I can create a new test. But let's just look at one of the existing tests. So once I've created that template, I can come in here. I'll just grab one of the existing tests that's in the system. We've got some failures. Let's just grab one that's in progress here. And again, this can be, this particular item is not serial number tracked, but if it were, we'd be able to go in there and specify the specific serial number we're doing this test against. And I can come in and, this one's pretty simple. I can just do the yes, no type stuff all the way down or hit the, in Business Central, it's the Alt down arrow key to sort of pop that thing up. So you don't actually have to use the mouse and the keyboard if you don't want to do your data entry. Or I shouldn't say you have to use the keyboard. You don't have to use the mouse. So you can keep your hands on the keyboard, and it does make data entry pretty simple, right? So anyway, that's how we can go in and do a very simple test where, in this case, it's just a bunch of Booleans and one lookup list and things like that to indicate pass or fail. And of course, as we're doing this, what it's doing is it's keeping track of the grade and everything else, right? This is clearly a failure at this point. And then when I finish it, that'll sort of flag that test as complete in a failure state. And at that point, I can create a retest on this. So we've got the original failure, but I can come in and create a retest. So it's the same test, same document, right? So this one is tied to production order. So same document, everything, same serial number, but it creates a retest to give me an audit trail of the number of different times I've done that inspection. Maybe I did some rework. Instead of creating a new test, I just do a retest, and I can see, yes, that rework, fixed the issues that we were having, okay? And when I flag that as finished, there's a few things that I can do. Well, number one, let's just do the Teams thing real quick. So if I do a share to Teams at this point, what it'll do is it'll pop up the Business Central Teams sharing window here in a sec. There we go. All right, so we'll give it another sec because this is the link to this particular test. But again, if people don't have the Business Central license, we can also dump in these cards in, well, we do dump these cards into the Teams message as well. So rather than have, somebody having to type a whole bunch of stuff here in Teams to, indicate what happened, the people that I'm sending this to will get this card here that they can get that information for the test without having to log into Business Central. So you don't need the Business Central license to be able to see this information here. And if you do, of course, I can click this, and it's the same as clicking the link. It'll open up this test for me. And again, this information that's put in this card here, you define that in the Quality Inspector setup, so you can put additional information in here as well, if you like. The other thing you can do, instead of doing the normal, share to Teams, you've got the Power Automate capability, where I could add a button here in Power Automate to send something to Teams with whatever detail I like, or send somebody an email or whatever I want. So that Power Automation or Power Automate capability helps us within Quality Inspector quite a bit, along with, like I said, when I finish this test. So when I finish this test, I can take all sorts of actions, like in Power Automate, send Teams messages, all that kind of stuff, or whatever you want to do, or I can use the built-in Business Central workflow capability. So let's just have a quick peek at that. So I'm going to go into the workflows within Business Central, and I don't have a workflow defined, so I'm just going to create a new workflow from scratch. And what we're going to do is say, hey, if I'm receiving something and it fails, what can I do about that, or what do I want to automate around that? So I'm going to call this, receive fail or something like that. Receiving fail. I should have probably done production, but that's okay. It doesn't really matter. And then let's just do put it in the Quality Inspector group. And then what I'm going to do is say, you know what? When I come in and I finish a quality inspection test, so you've got these basic events that you can trigger on, like when you change a test or create it or finish it or reopen it. So when I finish a test, and that test is, well, actually, let's do, so template code, let's do, well, I was on bicycle, let's do the bicycle checklist. So when we're doing the bicycle checklist, and there is a grade of fail, right? What we want to do is come in and do a bunch of stuff. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go in and I'm going to block that lot number, right? So the bicycle check didn't have lot numbers, but maybe the path didn't thing. I'm going to block, well, let's block the serial number instead, because the bike will have a serial number. And I'm going to go in there and I'm also going to move the inventory to a quality receiving location. So QA hold or something like that. And there's no bins for that QA hold. Those sorts of, sorry, I put it in the wrong spot. This will only apply if it was in QA hold. I'm going to put that in whatever my blue location, because it's sad, and do that. And I can either just create the journal lines for somebody else to post, or I can post that immediately. So as soon as that test fails, the bicycle inspection fails, I'm going to block the lot number or the serial number. I'm going to move the inventory, into a different bin or location. And then finally, maybe I want to do something else as well. Again, you've got all of these different triggers in here that you can use to do that. Maybe I want to create a new quality inspection test. And then what that'll do, you notice there's no options to set for that because it uses the test generation rules to create a new quality inspection test. So what that will do is come in and say, oh, your bicycle checklist failed. Well, if that fails, then I want to do an NCR inspection, right? So I can do an NCR report based on the failure of my bicycle checklist. Or maybe I want to do, corrective action report, or just redo the bicycle inspection again, right? Create a new test to retest it in the new location. So those are the types of things you can do in the workflow. Very quick and easy to set up, and bang, we've got it done. Okay, and I'll show you how we can do that. Similar things in Power Automate, just with a lot more capability in the Power Automate stuff. Okay, so again, what would happen if I hit finish there? It's going to go ahead and execute all of that, all of those actions because it was failed. Some of those actions won't work. I don't have a serial number on here and those sorts of things and blah, blah, blah. But that workflow will run and do everything it needs to do. Simple as that. Okay, now those were two test templates that I defined ahead of time and just showed you how they work, right? I came in here, I added in the fields, created new ones, all that kind of stuff, all fine and good. But let's go back to what I mentioned earlier, where if we're on a paper-based system and I want to move to this, well, that's a lot of work. I got to go in and create all these tests and all that kind of stuff. That's no fun. How do I address that? Well, let's go in here and I'm going to create a template from scratch. And let's call this, I don't know, we'll call it Work Center. And what I'm going to do is it's going to be a 5S inspection. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to add, now I've got my basics, that's all I care about. I need to have things to inspect. So I need to list all the fields that I need to inspect from here. So I'm going to hit this add fields to this template up at the top here. And again, I can create new fields or I can reuse existing fields that I happen to have. And I actually do have a few that I'd already defined. But instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this detect fields from a picture. So picture is a little misleading. It's any PDF or image, like you can take a photograph of your existing quality documents or whatever you like. But I'm going to do it based on a PDF. So now it comes in here and says, what is it? What's your existing document that you're using? And I'm going to use this one. It's just from this, just found it online. CI Toolkit, this 5S audit. So let's just actually see what that looks like. So this is the form that, unedited basically from the web, that it's a pretty basic one. So this one doesn't need anything special for me at all. I can use this as it is. If you have more complex forms, you might need to build what we call a model within Azure AI, which means you upload this into Azure and you highlight what fields are important to you so it knows what the document contains. But something like this, I didn't have to do anything special. All I did was I grabbed it off the web, I hit open here, and what it's going to do is it's now going to analyze that form. Give it a second, it only takes a few seconds. And this is what it's pulled out of that form. So here are all the fields that it thinks were important to grab in there. And it knows whether it's like they had a checkbox thing there. So most of these are Boolean, like yes, no. Some of them are text, right? So, the leader or the auditor and all that kind of stuff it brings in. And I can adapt these right here, right? So I can come in and decide that that's not text, it's something else or whatever I like. But basically, it's pulled all of that automatically out of that document. So now let's just come in here and I'm going to grab a few of these guys to use. I'm going to use the first few, so like number 1, and it's sorted based on the Business Central sort order. Number 2, number 3, number 4, and we'll do the leader, and we'll do the work area as well. So I'll grab all of those guys, bring them in, hit finish, and there's my entry form now. So here's my test, and I'm good to go. Okay. Now, in order to actually, fill in values for this test, I'm going to have to go in and tell it what this test applies to. So what I'm going to do is just come in here. And on the table, I've added Work Center here, so I can assign this test to a Work Center. And then again, I could set a filter here to choose a specific Work Center to assign that test to automatically. If I was on the Work Center card, I could hit a button with Power Automate. It would automatically create the appropriate test for that Work Center. I'm just going to leave that blank. We don't really care. And now I've got that all set up and I can actually create a test. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to choose a Work Center that I'm going to do this test on. It doesn't really matter. I'll do the mixer again and hit OK. And it's going to generate that test for me automatically. And now I can just come in here and enter all my values. Pretty simple. So somebody gets the sheet that you've printed out, they fill in the values, they hand it in, and somebody sits down and types it in. Well, like I mentioned earlier, we don't have to do that. We can take that handwritten form and import it automatically. So there's a couple of ways you can do it. And one I'm going to start with. This won't actually work because of my webcam, but I'm going to do it with the camera. If I was running this on a phone or a tablet, it would work fine because the camera on a phone or a tablet is good. We'll see here in a sec as it pops up. There we go. So there's the form that I have. I don't know, it's kind of hard to see, but I've got a handwritten form, right, with the work areas paint, Lisa, and a whole bunch of check boxes in there. But you know, that's my form, all handwritten, you know, not great writing or anything. And I'm just going to take that photo and use it. So grabbed everything accurately, right? So all of this is accurate. And we can see that accuracy if I look at that camera again. So we'll come in here and come on. As soon as it loads up, it doesn't want to load up. Anyway, it grabbed all that, grabbed Lisa, paint, it grabbed all the appropriate values here and everything else. But let me show you what it looks like if we do it from a scanned version. So same thing, I'm just going to do an upload, but here it is. Here's the document that I had scanned in. So instead of just taking a photo of it, here's a scanned document, you know, the text. This is what it looks like. It's not, you know, pretty, right? Like it's what people would, you know, put in these boxes probably in real life. And if I grab that guy, it'll go do that analysis, do the OCR on it, and suck it in. So there you go. So it's got all the appropriate values. These are all accurate, but if they weren't, like if it missed something, I could come in here and change it here, all that kind of stuff. But it brought it in, I hit OK, and it fills in the test for me. Okay, so that's again how you can kind of stay with some of your paper-based processes and still have that electronic record keeping. Because once it's in here, I've got all that workflow capability. Like this is a failure. Okay, so what happens on a failure? Well, I could have that workflow automatically generate, I don't know, meeting request if I want to do a meeting about why these guys are always sucking at dealing with their tools or whatever it happens to be, right? I can also come in, we've got some basic reports here, but reporting is very simple in the system. All of this data is in Business Central. It's tied very explicitly to the thing that you're working with. So I can go in and I can look at all the inspections against this work center, all the inspections against a specific lot number, serial number, everything else, print that out in one of the standard reports. And these are just Business Central reports. Most people will customize these to look the way they like, or dump it to Excel or create your own custom reports or whatever you want. So now we've got that quality information in the system and we've got a ton of possibilities for that versus relying on the paper. And by the way, when I did that, you know, take a photo to read it, it did attach it as well. So that is an option. You can have it, I won't bother opening it. That's the photo I took from the webcam, and it will attach it. And these template documents here, by the way, those are the ones that are linked to the template. So if you have test procedures and things like that, you can drop those documents on the template. And when I open up the test, I can see them here at the test level. I'll very briefly show you, sort of the tablet interface. So, again, you can run it on a phone or a scanner. And this is the tablet interface, and there it is on the screen, but that's the tablet I'm using. It's a rugged tablet with a built-in scanner. But basically, it's the same sort of thing, just in a tablet. This, by the way, this is the information that you set up to show in Business Central. These are the bricks that we're talking about. And I can open up any of these tests. And it's very simple to come in here enter the values. Or again, if I've got a handwritten sheet, right from here, I can come in, take a photo of that handwritten sheet, and it'll do the same thing you just saw in Business Central, or take a photo of, or multiple photos of, damaged product or whatever it happens to be on the tablet interface. And the phone interface is similar. It just doesn't, obviously have this kind of stuff, but it's very easy to use this to, capture your quality information in the system, right? So, all that kind of stuff is all there. So anyway, that is how that guy works. That's the tablet interface, and you can do the same thing on the phone. Now back to Business Central though. One other thing I'll show you. So we talked about a little bit on purchasing and production and things like that. Just very briefly show you. I'll load up a purchase order here, and I don't remember which one it was, but doesn't matter. We come in here, and right on the purchase order, production order, those sorts of things, I can come in here and I can, show all the tests for this particular document and item. Or if I need to create a test, I can create a test right from here. So right from a lot of these pages, you can come in, hit create test, and it'll use those test generation rules to actually create the test. And in this case, you'll notice I don't have a rule that says that tells me what kind of test I need to create automatically for this item. So I'd either have to set up the rule or manually create that test from a template. But you can create those tests directly from the purchase order, production order, those sorts of things. But in some cases, you may want to create a test like for that work center, or a fixed asset or a person or something, or a custom table. You may want to be able to create tests from those without doing any extensions. So let's go to the lot number information card here, or list. And I've only got a couple lots in here, and you can see this one does have a couple of tests in progress against that lot number. So if I open up that particular lot number, I can see what's happening with those, and I can drill down into the tests that are in progress for that particular lot number and see what people are doing with it. So we've got a couple going on there, and those sorts of things. If I go to this lot number 2 here, I don't have any tests in progress, but I want to create a test for this lot number. So the way I do that is I go in, and under the Power Automate thing here, I've got this button that says create test on lot info. And when I click that, what it's going to do, so it's going to come up and load here in a sec, and I'm not going to wait, and you hit run now, and what it's going to do is it's going to run that flow in the background, and pretty quickly here, we'll see that yes, we now have a test associated with that lot information card. So this is just Business Central. All right, we'll give that guy a sec to refresh, and what I'll do is I'll go into the, well, there it's done. So there's the test. It created that test for us automatically from that Power Automate. And the way that worked, I'm just going to go into Manage Flows here. So this is the guy here that we just ran, and it's really, really simple. What it is, and there are videos online on the website that show you how to do this. All right, so all it did was, we said, hey, this is the lot information card, so you have to get that from sort of the page inspector. So that's a lot information card. That's where the button is going to live. So we're saying based on that page that we're on, this is what we want to do. And all it's doing is saying, okay, it's my demo environment. This is the company I want in, and we specify the API we're using. And so this is the Quality Inspector API that you have access to from Power Automate or any external system. And so we're saying we're using that API. And what we want to do within that API is create a new test. So you can see there's a whole bunch of stuff we can do from within Power Automate related to Quality Inspector. We can assign tests, we can block stuff, we can do putaways, we can do all of that. So you can see how you can build up a flow that's very, very comprehensive. You can say, hey, if it's this type of test and it failed, and in this particular attribute failed or whatever, what we're going to do is we're going to block stuff, we're going to move stuff, we're going to send somebody an email, those sorts of things from Power Automate, right? So very quick and easy to actually set this up, and there are videos online that show you how to do it, and away you go. Now, the other one that I had in here, just to show you what it looks like, and again, there's a video online for this. So this one's a little different. This one says, hey, when a quality inspection test fails, what we want to do is actually send a Teams message to this specific demo team in Teams, this particular channel, And this is what we want to put in that message to teams. So now this one is saying, yeah, every time, a quality inspection record changes, not fails or is finished or whatever, just when it changes, we'll post that message. But again, you could put whatever criteria you want in here. If it's finished and it's a failed state, we send the message or whatever you want to do. So that's the integration with Power Automate. All right, let's go back into Business Central here. Now, I think that pretty much covers it, right? So really, the core of this, you define your test templates, which are really your entry forms. Once those entry forms are defined, you tell it how you want to create those tests, either automatically or manually. And then the test pops up, or you open the test and you fill in the values. It'll automatically grade the product or just indicate pass, fail, or you can do the sampling. And based on all of that, when you finish that test, it can do things like block the lot numbers or automatically move, the material from one location or one bin to another, those sorts of things. If you don't want to do that automatic disposition, by the way, I'll just open up the one we're doing here. You can actually come in and manually do those sort of disposition steps as well, right? So you can move the inventory, create putaways, those sorts of things as well. But that's basically it. Very simple. The setup is very easy, especially if you have existing quality forms you can upload. Setup is very easy. Once it's there, the test can automatically be created. You simply fill them in Business Central, phone, tablet, whatever you like. It grades it, flags it, blocks lots, prevents you from doing things with lot numbers, and you're done. And then from an analysis perspective, there's the reports, and then we have a number of different analysis tools built in where you can go in and look at different charting things and things like that to see what the results are for specific item numbers or whatever you like. So there's a whole bunch of charts and analysis pages in here that you can use. And one of the nice things is in the new Business Central, that analysis view, you can use sort of the raw data to come in here and do your own sort of pivot tables and things like that right within Business Central as well, because this is effectively giving you the raw data that you can do those analysis views in Business Central, or dump this to Excel for your own custom reporting or whatever the heck you want to do with it. All right, that's kind of the end-to-end sort of solution for the quality inspection. Let's go back here. All right, so a little bit on licensing. So it's licensed per company, it's not per user. You can have 20 different locations doing testing with 5 testers in each location. It's one cost per company. That's all there is. So, no user-based licensing or anything. Like, obviously you need a Business Central license for the users, but nothing from us. We also have fixed price implementation services. So in the case of Quality Inspector, it's primarily just, training sessions that we do for you to get you up to speed. And of course, we've got the product support through email or phone that you can use if you run into any questions or problems. If you are using that AI capability and I only showed you one portion of the AI capabilities that we have. We actually have more in Quality Inspector, like what I call dental assistant mode for hands-free quality entry and other ways of generating quality inspection fields and things like that. But regardless of which capabilities you use, you will need your own Azure AI subscription. For just sort of the document management side of things, it costs very, very little to have that subscription, and may be very worthwhile if you're moving from a paper-based system. And if you have questions on the actual pricing for this, check with your partner. They'll be able to help you out with all of that. But with that, thanks everyone for attending.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more great content, and remember to hit that bell icon to stay updated. See you in the next video.